y'all. So today we're going to be talking about the story of Ruth and Boaz. As you know, there is a movie out, the #1 movie on Netflix right now, the Ruth and Boaz movie that is produced and inspired by the biblical story in the Bible of Ruth and Boaz. So today I want to talk about, as a marriage and family therapist, some things that popped up in the movie and that are biblical based and kind of like what the original Bible story is all about, and maybe some themes that were not addressed or even aware, you weren't even aware of them in the movie, because again, it's inspired by the story, biblical story. It's a beautiful movie. I thought it was well done. But I wanted to talk about the original Ruth and Boaz story, and I was just like, I wonder if people know some key things that actually happened in the original biblical story. So we're going to talk about a couple of those things because I think they're important. I would suggest you go check it out, the movie on Netflix. I highly suggest you check it out. I think again, Devon Franklin produced it. Acting and the actresses were well done, great singing. I love the movie. I love it when we have biblical stories come to the mainstream. So a couple of things that you may not have realized if you don't know the original story. I highly suggest you go to the Bible and read the whole story first, and then come back to this video so we can highlight a couple things. So the book of Ruth is deliberately set in the days where the judges ruled. This is in Ruth 1:1. When the judges ruled, this was a time of moral, social, and spiritual instability in Israel. The book of Judges kind of reminds me of like God saying, I just need to use somebody. So he was literally using imperfect leaders to fill his work in the earth, and that is the Judges era. Another thing, so this story is based in this era of just a lot of instability in Israel. The story is short, it's only 4 chapters, but it's placed between Judges and 1 Samuel, which links it to Israel's larger redemptive narrative. So there is a storyline that we're following here about in the overall aspect of the Bible. Key characters are Naomi. Naomi is the tragic figure in the movie and in the Bible. She loses her husband, and in the Bible she loses both her sons. I think in the movie her other son had already passed, and so the second son that passed with her husband was just the ultimate tragedy for her. What ends up happening is after her sons and her husband passed away, she's uprooted to Moab, but then returns to Bethlehem because she's feeling entirely empty, bereft, and bitter, which in the Bible it talks about her saying, "Call me Mara," right? Which is bitter. In the movie, again, if you haven't watched the movie, there's a little bit of a spoiler in here, so I highly suggest that you watch it and then come back to this video. In the movie, she does go back to a place that she grew up in, right? And she was feeling empty and bitter at that time. So that is those two themes are present in both the movie and the Bible. Her condition is a part of the drama of the story, because at times she seems to internalize that bitterness, particularly against God, and she does have feelings like God has abandoned her. And the movie does show a scene where you can tell that she was very upset with the Lord. She was not happy. And then Naomi is also a strategist, right? She's the person watching what's going on, particularly with Ruth and Boaz, and she encourages Ruth. She encourages Ruth to act. She encourages her to later help orchestrating the legal contractual agreements to the steps to Boaz. She advises Ruth to approach Boaz at the threshing floor. Now, in the movie, it almost seems like Boaz was more so pursuing her than she was like pursuing him. But I think Naomi, there is a part in the movie where she does like encourage Ruth to go like talk to him. I think that's where they were like connecting that. So Ruth is the second character in the story. She is a Moabite, y'all, which is a foreigner by birth. This is significant because Moabites were viewed as suspicious people in Israel. So key. In Deuteronomy 23:3, Israel prohibits Moabites to enter the assembly up to the 10th generation. That's just how much they were foreigners in that land. But her story in the Bible actually demonstrates that your background does not prevent faithful loyalty and inclusion. So it was it was a big deal for her to be there and for her to declare to Naomi in Ruth 1:16-17 that your people will be my people and your God, my God. That is like one of the most famous statements about the book of Ruth. It is a powerful move of identity. She's leaving behind her Moabite roots and embracing Naomi's people and their God. Ruth labored in the field of Boaz's field, right? It wasn't just about survival. It places her in a relational framework where God's kindness through Boaz can be made manifest. I think about in our own lives, right? How God will orchestrate something based on our obedience. I know I have multiple stories of how I did not really understand how my steps were being ordered until I looked backward. Very much so, something like that. And then there's the threshing floor scene, Ruth 3, which is a very rich symbolism and cultural nuance, because Ruth goes to Boaz's sleeping place and uncovers his feet and effectively lying down, asking for his protection and redemption. Now, this is one of the biggest differences that I noticed in the Bible version versus the movie. And the movie was more so based around Boaz pursuing her and not necessarily her going to ask for his protection. She was more so trying to protect him, if anything, from the guy that was after her. And so the last character, the main character of this story, is Boaz. He is, quote unquote, the kinsman's redeemer figure, also called Goel. That's the word that is used there. In the Israelite custom, this person had obligations, but to redeem a land, they had to redeem the land, marry a widow, and restore the family name or inheritance when the original owner could not. That's what a kinsman redeemer does. So there's also this legal complication that's at play, because a closer relative, right, has first claim to the land that they're gleaning on, that Ruth is gleaning on, that redemption. So that first relative actually is the one that was not very clear, or even, I don't even think they brought that up in the movie at all. That Boaz is like, okay, there's a legal complication. But I think the way that they did that was the guy that was after Ruth had a legal contractual agreement to her and her music. And so it wasn't about the land, it was about her. And so I think that's how they were trying to bring that into the movie. It actually brings that man into the city to negotiate. And he successfully negotiates to release his rights and freeing Boaz to redeem Ruth. You see how they're trying to like intertwine that theme into like the movie, but it was not about anything other than the land. The land was supposed to be to the closer relative. They were supposed to be the one to get the rights to the land. So that was the legal contractual agreement that Naomi actually was able to also be a part of. But in the end, it was about the land. In the movie, like I said, it was about the music. A couple of themes that I really kind of want you to think about and draw out from this movie, and even as you're reading the original Bible story and then watching the movie, is God works through ordinary people and ordinary events. This story of Ruth, these 4 chapters, it does not have like grand angels or miraculous signs outside of like the obvious strategic steps of godly obedience. Most of the work that is meditated in this story is through faithfulness. Relationships is through strategic movement that, again, Naomi encouraged, and some of the social norms that were at play as well. Another theme is covenantal kindness and loyalty, which is hesed, Hesed, Hebrew concept, which is very central to this whole story. And it denotes loyal love, right? Her loyal love to Naomi, covenant faithfulness, right? And then mercy. The characters, Ruth, Boaz, and Naomi, they have that hesed towards each other. Another theme is redemption and restoration. So this imagery of the kinsman redeemer, the restoration of inheritance and reestablishing of a lineage that had been broken when Naomi lost her husband and her 2 sons, it's giving life from death. It's giving like there is life after death. That is a very strong theme. Ruth and Boaz's union restores Naomi's line, and it leads actually to David's ancestral line, which eventually leads to Jesus. So another theme that pops up is inclusion is beyond ethnic boundaries. Ruth is a Moabite, y'all. She's not even an Israelite. It is fully included in Israel's story, however, in the Bible. Like, this is a story about the Israelites, but Ruth is a Moabite who was also considered a foreigner, a suspicious foreigner. And that is a broader biblical theology of faith, not ethnicity, is what is central in God's eyes. So another theme that pops up is suffering, waiting, and hope. So Naomi's bitterness, like that she had, like, call me Mara, like she was just overwhelmed in her grief. They're waiting. They're in a season of waiting. After Naomi lost her husband and her sons, after Ruth decided that she was going to, one of the sons was Ruth's husband, if I'm not mistaken. That's what connected Ruth to Naomi. They both were in a state of grief, but Ruth decided, no, I'm following you. Your people will be my people. Your God will be my God. And that was a waiting season while they were both grieving. Naomi leaned into bitterness more, and Ruth leaned more into Naomi. But it is a story of redemption and God's timing, and God's timing is key, but also human perseverance, or as I would like to say, from a therapeutic perspective, the processing season is a season of perseverance, a season of processing, and of waiting. But God comes through, because the story does not erase pain, but it shows you that you can work through it. Another theme is the lineage to David and Christ. Again, Ruth and Boaz's child ends up being a child named Obed, and Obed is the grandfather of David. You can find that in Ruth 4:13-17, and this story is situating the messianic trajectory down the road. Again, Jesus is coming. A couple of things that I want to mention from, again, a therapeutic perspective is how they portrayed Ruth and Boaz's dialogue, consent, vulnerability, and boundaries. In the movie, Ruth was more like that to Boaz, when in all actuality, Ruth in the Bible approached Boaz for his protection, his guidance. In the movie, Ruth needed protected, but she was not asking Boaz. If anything, she was trying to protect him. I'm a grief and loss and hope. So Naomi loses her identity, essentially, right? And Ruth's widowhood, the vulnerability of women in this ancient society, is something that should be noted, because again, widows were vulnerable in this ancient society where women needed men. Men were like the dominant figure, where they made a lot of the choices and decisions. So as a widow, with a loss of identity, they were very, very vulnerable. So not only was that, I don't feel, one of the ways that they tried to portray that was when she lost her foreclosure on her house and all of her belongings, and she had to go back to this rundown house in her hometown. Another thing that you can really grasp from this movie and this story is this idea of legacy and restoring the family. That generational faith is strong in Ruth's story. I really think about anybody that feels like they're the person in their family to restore this strong sense of faith and this strong sense that God is going to come through for them. That God can and that he will, with your obedience matched with your faith, no matter what you have gone through, that God can be your redeemer. He shows Ruth that, and he shows Naomi that as well. So another thing is covenant, faith, and commitment, along with identity. So Ruth's faith choice was her declaration to Naomi. That was a faith move. I just imagine, how Ruth came into the knowledge of Jesus and Christ, and her submission to Jesus was through this tragedy. Through tragedy can come beautiful things. Through tragedy can come restoration. And that is what I gather from that. The spiritual conversion and commitment that happened. And it's not just about the romantic elements. And so some of that was, I think they tried to weave it in by them going to church, by Ruth going to church, but that was not really a strong thing. Again, they're trying to modernize it and make it mainstream. So I totally get it. And the original narrative intentionally works within those constraints and still advances as a theology of dignity and redemption. So when you take the original story with the constraints of a widow in a society that sees them as vulnerable and the trajectory that they ended up on, then you see just how miraculous and how powerful God was in this story, that he could take this like desperate situation and turn it into a blessed and fulfilling opportunity. That should encourage you to know, no matter where you are today, no matter what you're doing today, when you lean on faith and trust in God and you follow and commit to his faithfulness, that your people will be my people and your God my God. Like, she threw her whole self into the culture of the Israelites and understanding them and their God. So that means she knew God. She learned about God, and she had a commitment to him. I encourage you to do the same. If this resonated with you and you really enjoyed this, let me know. Like this, share this, subscribe to our channel. Did you see the movie? Did you not? What were your thoughts on the movie? Like, let me know. I respond to every comment on my YouTube page. So please just let me know your thoughts on this. Like, do you know the story of Ruth and Boaz? Did you learn something new? A question that you have about the story that you're like wondering about. Like, let's chat about it. All right, guys, I'm gonna get going, but I thought this was important to talk about. Again, I hope it encourages you, and I'll talk to you guys later. Have a good one.